Sikhs from around the world by showcasing their professions, passions, and perspectives. I'm your host, Mandheer Singh, aka the Nihung. 3, 2, 1. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Balpreet Kaur, welcome to the Net Nihung's arena.
Thank you. I'm excited to step into the arena.
Yeah, no, I'm excited that you're here too.
Yeah.
And I was actually thinking before we got on, I mentioned to you just before we started recording here that I was going through your Twitter and your Instagram and all that kind of stuff. But I was wondering, I'm not even exactly sure when and where I met you. Was it Cincinnati Smogum?
Yeah. So I think I remember when I met you more than you remember meeting me, because my entry into Sikhi actually came because I heard your wife doing Kirtan.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so during Cincinnati Smalgam, I think around like 2010 or 2009, like everyone from Detroit would come to Cincinnati, and I had never really like gone to Smalgam before that. And so my first year, I heard Jasu Penji doing Kirtan. I was blown away. I had never heard Kirtan sung like that in a sangat or like with so much love before. And
wow.
I remember like being so awestruck that I kind of like went up to you and Penji, but I didn't really like you. I think Kesar was small at that time. And so I was kind of like stalking you all. I was like, oh, I really wanted to, I was working up my courage to like talk to you.
Really?
And talk to Benji. And then I like didn't.
Oh my God. I didn't know this. I didn't know any of this.
I mean, yeah, I was a teenager. I was like 16, but then we actually met officially during Siana retreat.
Oh, okay.
The next year, where we talked about, I think the theme that year was Rehat Maryada, and I met a lot of people that year, actually, like Chicago Sangat, Michigan Sangat, and so that was when we first met, was through Siana retreat.
Yeah. No, I remember that now. I know what you're talking about. The Rehat Maryada year.
Yeah.
That was 2010?
I think it was 2011.
2011.
Yeah, Mohanpal Virji kind of got into, well, he made a point of like should kashare, can we wear basketball shorts, you know? And I remember him saying like, no, the guru gave us white kashare and I'm going to wear what the guru is telling me to wear. So I remember that very vividly.
For people that are listening, Mohanpal is my younger brother.
Yes. So
yeah, he's not one. I don't think he's one to stir controversy. That's usually my job.
Yeah, that's something I've definitely noticed. You and Mohanpal Virji have very different personalities, but it's the core of who you are is very similar as well.
It's funny you're saying that because I think we have we've had a lot of the similar interests. You know, like the kinds of movies we like, the kinds of stories we like, martial arts, all this kind of stuff. And even Sikhi, you know, Mohanpal, Baljinder, and then Ravi and Bobby, Ravinder and Brinder. We all got into Sikhi at the same time. And so we were kind of like this core group of like 5 young guys, you know, that we kind of supported each other, not even intentionally supporting each other. It just ended up being our support group. But we have a lot of interests and stuff, but we have very opposite personalities.
I know.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's how siblings should be in a lot of ways. You complement each other, you butt heads with each other.
Sure. Yeah.
You know?
No, that's what makes it fun. That's what makes family fun.
That's true.
Right.
That's true.
Now, you got into Sikhi 2009-ish then. Maybe not get into Sikhi, maybe you got...
Yeah, I started exploring it 2009, 2010. 2011, I was in high school at this point,
Okay.
and so I always I always feel like the late bloomer in a lot of ways. But yeah, just got involved with Cincinnati stuff and was really inspired. Um the Panth Sikhi in general was such a different path from anything I had seen. And so I really resonated with the potential of like being loving, courageous, being so inspired by something
Mm.
um, that you you could live your life in the service of something other than yourself. Um,
Yeah.
and I saw that in the way that like people were doing kirtan. I saw that in the way that people were doing seva at camps, the way that they conducted themselves in their personal lives. And I really saw an example of what my life could be if I walked this path. And
Interesting.
yeah, and it really gave me hope. And I, yeah, and then the rest is, the rest is,
History,
you
as they
know,
say. Yeah.
history. Yeah, the rest is history.
No, but
Um,
the thing is, like, it's interesting to me that those kinds of core values that stuck
mm,
out to you so much, it seems like you were able to attach yourself to them very quickly. Most of us go our whole lives in Sikhi and never really commit to them to that
mm,
level. So maybe I guess the reason I'm even saying that is because it was like 2012 when that whole Reddit thing happened, right?
yeah,
And that's you're probably sick of talking about that all the time, but everybody knows about it by now. But
yeah,
that Reddit thing happened. Your response to that person really embodied your the Sikh attitude,
mm,
which 2012, you're saying 2010 is when you were really exploring. I mean, a year or two into really getting into Sikhi, you were able to so, you know, so strongly dedicate yourself to those values, and that came out in your answer to that post.
yeah. That post is definitely how the Panth got to know me for sure.
Yeah.
And it opened up a lot of doors for me. I was only 4 months old, Virgi. I had I had received Amrit only in April of that year. And I, I think um, I think the flow of Hukam just happened in that way. Um,
Yeah.
I don't, you know, sometimes the call comes and you answer it without knowing what you're doing, and it unfolds in the way that it needs to unfold. And I feel like that's what happened. Um, I do think that, you know, the post Amrit Sanchar high was definitely a part of that.
But that's what it's
Um,
supposed to be.
yeah. And I
Yeah.
think, I mean, I look back to that uh, post now, and I do resonate with what I said, but I don't think I could ever like replicate that because it was so organic. It was so just
Right.
in the moment. But I think I was just inspired by like so many Gursikhs around me, so much
Hmm.
Barney that I mean, I came to Sikhi out of desperation. It
Okay. What do you
was
mean by that?
desperation in the sense that um, I was longing for something.
Okay, but
Uh,
you're talking about in your teens and high school.
yeah,
Like what is it, the typical kind of teen angst, the typical kind of issues teens are dealing with, and you weren't satisfied with what was around you, or was it something deeper?
it was both.
Okay.
Um, I think you can't avoid the typical teenage angst of trying to figure out who you are, why you are, what your place is in the world.
Right.
But I think I was I was already such a like deep thinker. I'm an overthinker.
Okay.
And so I had been questioning my purpose in life since I was like 10.
Oh, wow.
right?
That's young.
And so, but I was always attracted to like inspiration and like um this idealism.
Yeah.
And Sikhi was this like source of beauty, like beauty with the capital B.
Okay.
Like the Sikhi that Professor Puran Singh Ji talks about,
Right.
the Sikhi that like is so inherent in Barney, right? That like just feeling like that was what I was looking for. Um, and I still am. And so very quickly in the desperation to like feel fulfilled, to feel like I was meant to be somewhere or meant to be someone, I really found that in Barney.
Right. Right.
um,
But the thing is, it wasn't like a particular event or a particular moment in your life that made you think, hey, I need something more. Because like for us, it was 84. 84
yeah.
happened. We had no clue about Sikhi before that, actually.
Mm,
84 happened and it got our attention. Now it took a
yeah.
couple years, but then the it was definitely, I can pinpoint that 84
Mm,
happened and we're watching what's going on with very careful attention. We're watching the news, we're trying to figure it out, and we're identifying ourselves with Sikh, even though we at that time cut hair, no
mm,
knowledge or anything about Sikhi or whatever. But
mm,
from that moment, I can say, okay, it planted a seed, and then due to the sangat that we got and the people that we met, we were able to learn and
yeah.
grow. But for you, it was more of just you were already a deep thinker and you were already attracted to things that inspire.
Yeah.
Bonnie was one of those things.
Yeah. And I mean, I had lived a very tumultuous like life, being a child of immigrants, being in the typical Punjabi family. We saw ups and downs
Yeah.
that, you know, are really stressful and really um, just shape you as a person. And
Yeah.
so, just from those experiences, I was always like, this can't be the entirety of life. This
Right.
cannot be like who we're meant to be.
Okay.
Um, and and that just built up like from my childhood onwards. As I was approaching college, I was like, I cannot be stuck in the same cycle of like of trauma,
Sure.
of generational like poverty. It cannot be stuck in these, this cannot be all that is to life, right?
Okay.
And I guess like for me, I wasn't going to get the answers in my high school friends. I wasn't going to get the answers from any of the books I was reading or, you know, but I had found the answers in Barney and Sangat, and that level of fulfillment really solidified my commitment to like, yeah, let's take Amrit.
Yeah.
Let's work towards, and I didn't even realize what I was preparing myself for. Like I still don't believe I'm walking this path. I still don't believe I'm a Sikh sometimes because it truly changed the trajectory of my life. Like you know how every family has that one critical moment in their history that changes them, that you know, like if you had a time machine and you wanted to go back and reverse things, and that's the moment that will always happen in every
Right. Right.
timeline. I feel like I feel like me choosing to be a Sikh was that.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because even when that Reddit thing happened and you gave your response and you said you were 4 months Amritari at the time, you had just
Yeah.
taken Amrit 4 months previous, and your response seems inspired. But what was
Mm.
really amazing is the original poster. He apologized, and his apology was quite moving too.
Mm.
Like you could see that his life had also changed now because
Yeah.
he had learned about Sikhs and he had learned about the identity and now respected it and regretted that he had ever
Mm.
done that. So like when
Yeah.
you said that sometimes Waheguru is doing things and we're all, and it's not even necessarily about you or about him, but like it's about all these things coming together in this big play.
Yeah.
You know, pretty amazing. I mean, because I like I said this morning, I was going through like Googling you and stuff, and I read that was the first time I had read his apology. I actually didn't even know that he had apologized. I just knew the story in general.
Yeah.
Did you ever have any interaction with him after that?
I messaged him. I emailed him a couple of days later. But I think he was moving to like Florida or something. And so we never actually got to connect in person back when in person was still a thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that moment happened and I still don't know why or how it happened. Such as Hukum, but it really helped me understand what the Panth is. I mean, before that, I was just a girl in Cincinnati, and half of the people I was talking to or building a sangat with, like, didn't know what Cincinnati was, right? Like, you all came to Cincinnati for Smagam, but outside of that, like, nothing really happens here, right?
Well, okay, hang on though. Because I grew up in Dayton, in Beaver
You
Creek,
did grow
Ohio.
up in Dayton, yeah.
So we were
That's
in
true.
Cincinnati all the time. And
That's
actually,
true.
we used to come to Cincinnati in the early 80s, like before 84, up by Mandheer Singh SDO, and John to come do Kirtan at the Cincinnati Gurdwara. And we used to come down and listen to it. So I have a long history with Cincinnati. It wasn't just random that we showed up there.
I mean, I guess I should say, like, by the time I had grown up, like, Cincinnati didn't have that level of like sangat anymore.
Yeah.
And so
I don't know that we were at any level either. Don't say it like that.
Right.
And we were but we used to be there, and it was good. Kirtan used to be good.
I should clarify, like, the kind of sangat that I wanted in my life, like, Cincinnati did not readily have, and so we had to build it. But even then, it was like just a couple of us and then little kids. And I was either hanging out with people that were older than me or younger than me. There was no one like my age who understood what I was going through.
Right. That's tough.
And so even just Cincinnati in general, like, my family is super Punjabi, right? We're from the village, we're from the Pind, and I've grown up in this environment. And so for me to then go and say I'm part of the Panth, I didn't even know what the Panth was. And so that Reddit incident actually helped me expand and feel like I belonged in the larger Sikh community.
Well, that's really interesting.
Yeah. And I got to like meet so many different Sikhs from so many different parts of the US and Canada and India and the UK that it really helped me think about my Sikhi in terms of a global sense, and helped me really think about, I have family all over the globe. I have a community that knows me, that supports me, no matter where I go. And that, I think, was really crucial because that gave me the courage to then get through the next 4 years of undergrad. Because again, I had just started wearing a dastar. My gaze on my face had just started coming in, right? And to then be honored in such a way by the Panth to say that, we support this Amritari Kaur was a lot. And it really gave me courage, and it gave me a sense of support. But it also had its negative
no, I'm sure you must have gotten, you must have had, because even in our community, there's a lot of people that are just going to react negatively, right? Because they're not going to understand. But beyond that, I think you can look at it as a character building exercise where you already showed integrity in the way you responded. But I see what you're saying though. Now you're connected with this larger sangha, and now all of a sudden you realize you have this global family that you're a part of, and they're identifying with you.
Yeah.
So that's pretty neat
Yeah.
too. But then, okay, so then you go on to college and you're at Ohio State.
Yeah.
Yep. I was at Ohio.
OH.
Yeah, I was at Ohio State from 94 to 99.
And actually, I knew that. Someone had told me that you had gone to Ohio State. And then I had found out that you had started the Sikh Student Association, or you had like continued it or
Okay, so
somewhere.
wait, hang on. This is actually a really interesting thing. I'm not
Okay.
trying, I don't want to take over the show here.
No, it's okay. We
but
should all
but
know the history of SSAs around the nation.
so I thought I started the first Sikh Student Association at Ohio State.
Okay.
And I was into graphic design and doing all that stuff. And um, um, I was building websites and Windows themes, Sikh key based stuff. So I made this great Ohio State Student Association, Sikh Student Association logo.
Really?
Oh yeah, and I think I still have the shirt in my closet. I should have
Amazing.
wore that today on the episode.
Dang it.
But I was all proud of this, and we were kind of doing stuff, and it was one of those things where, we were trying to keep it Sikhi focused, and there was a little bit of pressure that, well, we should do Bhangra and we should do these kinds of things, and I was trying to say no, let's not, whatever. And I was all proud of this, and then I found out that I wasn't the first.
Yeah.
The first was, and it's amazing. Okay, this is an amazing story. Okay, do you know Dr. Rambir Singh Sandhu, who was in?
No.
Okay,
No.
he's the one that did the translations of Sanjanal Singh Pinarwali's speeches into English.
Oh,
Okay,
no,
he's the
I
one that
don't
did
know.
that book, and he's also the one that did like an updated English translation of the Sikh Rathnada, and it's a much, much better English translation than what's published by SGPC.
Okay.
He's a scholar. Okay,
Okay.
this guy, he was in Columbus and he had a huge library, and I used to go over there and talk to him all the time. So in the 60s, him, Dr. Gurbaksh Singh Gill, who used to
Okay.
come to camps and teach, and he's written a lot of books. He's the famously that Sikhs don't lie even if they have to die.
Yeah, he was the history teacher.
Don't be jealous. Jealousy is a journey to death, right? So these were these little sayings that he gave us. So Dr. Gurbaksh Singh Gill, Dr. Rambir Singh Sandhu, and Dr. Darshan Singh of Toronto, Akhand Kirtani Jatha,
Okay.
were all
Oh,
at
wow.
Ohio State in the 60s, and they had a Sikh Student Association.
Wow, because Ohio State had links with PAU, right? Punjab
Yes,
Agriculture University.
and that's what they were doing.
Yes.
They were doing their studies. I think Dr. Darshan Singh specifically and Gurbaksh Singh Gill maybe were
Wow.
agriculture.
I did not know the specific names.
Yeah.
But I in talking to like our Sikh Student Association advisor and just people at the university, I had found out that Ohio State had links to Punjab Agriculture University.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, when I got to Ohio State, like the SSA, I kind of feel like it has its ups and downs.
Yeah, yeah, for
super
sure.
active, and then it dies down.
Yep.
And every like 5-10 years, it
somebody takes the reins, and yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, I had tried to do that, and throughout my time at Ohio State, we had an SSA, and then we transitioned.
You were the president of it.
Just for a little bit, and
Okay.
then we had a group of like 6 or 7 folks that like help plan things, which is nice. Like we went to the Gurdwara once in a while, and then that was about it, actually. But I mean, like coordinating with college students is always difficult. But it was definitely like, I don't know why. I always felt like, especially in college, it either makes or breaks your identity in a lot of ways.
Sure.
And so,
because that's the time actually most of us are self-reflecting, right?
Yeah.
When you're at home with your parents and going through high school, whatever, you're very coddled, you're very protected, and you really don't know a lot about the world. You get to college, and like for me personally, like growing up, I always felt different. I felt odd. I felt out of place. I felt like people didn't like me. I mean, and I know it's a weird thing to say Sikhi wise, but at the time, middle school, high school, you're like, oh, girls aren't going to like me. I have a turban and a beard, and I don't want to keep it. And then, then you get inspired, whatever. But you get to college and all of a sudden you're interesting because everybody is different.
Yeah.
And now nobody really cares that you have a turban or beard, and you're making
Mhm.
friends left and right, and you're talking to people, open-minded people, and you're getting other ideas. And that's the time most of us reflect.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think from what I had seen, just in general, like it was like the opposite effect of like there were people who were like Sikh coming into college and then realized like they didn't identify
Yeah.
as that anymore. And then there were people on the opposite spectrum of like, you know, they wanted Sangat, they wanted to
Right.
connect in a Sikh oriented way. And it was just a push and pull between those people all of the time.
Yeah, no, we had that too. We had we had the guys that wouldn't, they just wore their hair back. They're smoking weed all the time. And I'm like, and then I'm having to explain to people, yeah, that's not what Sikhs are like. And then I was the exact opposite. I was so strict,
Yeah.
I never went to a single party. I never hung out with anybody that's
Yeah.
smoking and drinking and all that kind of stuff. And actually, I had it where my non-Sikh friends, sometimes they would call me. They're like, hey, everybody's going, I don't want to. Can I just come hang out at your place?
Oh, that's so good.
It kind of became a place that they could just chill to and not have to worry about that pressure.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had the same thing. I was probably one extreme. And then we had the other extreme where they were just the Sikhs were known as the party animals.
Yeah.
And especially Ohio State.
Yeah. My brother also went to Ohio State, my younger brother.
Yeah.
He's 3.5 years younger than I am.
Okay.
His experience with like the Punjabi Sikh, like just South Asian population in general at Ohio State was so different than mine. Because like it just hung out with like different people, and there were so many. There wasn't an SSA when he got there, but there were other like institutions which are definitely all about like partying and
right. Okay, so in your sophomore year, you end up doing a TED Talk at Ohio State.
Yeah.
And that was really interesting. So why don't you explain a little bit about how did you come about to do that? And then what was the message you were really trying to drive home there?
Yeah. I had just gotten an email saying like, hey, we saw you on Reddit. We're coming up with this TED Talk event at Ohio State. We'd love for you to be a part of it. And I was like, okay, sure. At that time I had done Symposium for like 4 years. And so Symposium taught me how to speak publicly and gave me the courage to get over my stage fright. So from a logistical level, I was definitely prepared. So the main point I wanted to convey was just introduce people to Sikhi and to contextualize like myself and who I am within that framework to 750 people who had never heard of me, seen me before, and had only known me through that Reddit incident.
But you have 84,000 views on that video.
Oh,
it's
do
not
I?
Just, it's not just 750 people anymore.
Right. But in that moment, I just wanted to convey like where I saw my story fitting in with the story of the Sikhs. Right. And so I brought up Guru Tegh Bahadur, brought up Guru Nanak.
No, the Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji lead-in that you did was awesome. Because actually, that was exactly what I thought about when I first heard about the Reddit incident, right? That was the same thing I thought about, that the Guru Sahib made us to stick out for a reason. And this may seem a little controversial to say it this way, but like, if there's going to be a hate crime, it's supposed to be against us. If someone's going to say something racist, we're designed to be the ones that take it first.
Yeah.
Because we're made to stand out that way. And it should be a warning to others that if it's happening to the Sikhs, it can happen to anybody else down that line. So now that it happened to us, we should take action. And that I thought about it that way too. And so when you led in with that story of Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji and how nobody came forward to claim his head, and then Guru Gobind Singh's desire to make a Sikh stand out, that you can't hide from your principles and who you are. Yeah. So I thought that was a really, really great way to do that. And the other thing that I found um, really interesting about it was the way you connected it personally with everybody.
Mm.
But I got to ask you something though. Did they give you like a TED Talk training? Because every TED Talk, they use that same kind of speech pattern where you kind of start off and then you kind of go higher and then you ask
Yeah.
a question and then you come down again.
Um, no,
Okay.
I'm an avid procrastinator. And that point in my life, I had no idea of like time management. So
Okay.
they would send me emails like, "Hey, we're meeting up to practice here." And I'd be like, "Oh no, I have an exam tomorrow that I didn't know and I need to study for." But I actually finished my speech the night before.
Oh, wow.
So, because I didn't know for the longest time what I wanted to say,
Hmm.
and what felt right, because there were so many narratives that I had absorbed from other people who had seen the Reddit post, and they were telling me like, "Wow, Balpreet, you're awesome! Like, this is great." And I was like, "Yeah, that's what you're saying, but what do I feel about this? How is this relevant to my life? Like, how have I learned and grown from this?" So it was a lot of picking apart like what the world is saying and what I was feeling at that moment. So when the spotlight is on you,
Yeah.
you know, you are introduced to other people's versions of your story. And I constantly have to navigate those expectations now, where it's like people see me and they see only the Reddit girl, or they only
Hmm.
see a Kaur who has gaze on her face, or they only see the Starwali Bibi, which is fine. I am all of those things. But I then have to think deeper and say, no, what is the Guru telling me? What is the Guru pointing out to me? And
Right.
so it took a couple of months and it took a lot of self reflection. And the story I had offered to the TEDx audience was really an honest account of how I saw myself fitting in to this larger history, right?
Yeah.
Because all I claim, and I think all Sikhs do this too, like everything I am is because of the Guru, everything I am is because of the Panth. And so how do I explain that to an audience that has never heard this before?
Right.
But looking back to the TED Talk now, there's so many. I wouldn't do that same TED Talk.
Okay. Okay. Well, I mean, you
um,
only
in
have
a lot
what
of
10,
ways.
15 minutes
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah,
right? Is
yeah,
within they're all supposed to be less than 15 minutes or something
yeah,
like that, right? So
yeah,
it's not a whole lot of time to tell a big story. But
yeah.
what would you do different? What would you say different? Or what would you want to say different?
That's a good question. Um,
What I'm here for.
yeah, I know. And I've thought about this a lot because my relationship to Sikhi has changed and evolved and grown and um, lessened and like all of these things over the past 8 years. I think if I had to redo my TED talk, I would not be so idealistic.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
because I think the original message of my TED talk that was perceived was like kindness solves everything.
Right.
And that the Guru points us to be kind. Yes, the Guru does point us to be kind, but Guru also points us to be courageous. And sometimes you have to do unkind things to be courageous.
Yeah, you have to crack a
um,
few eggs to make an omelet.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, and I think I think the way that I had told the story, um, like what of Guru Tegh Bahadur and Guru Nanak Jagjit,
Hmm.
what was it, Manjita Jagjit, right? Like
Yeah.
that. that was more like, this is how I'm applying it to my personal life. But if I had to redo that TED Talk, I would zoom out and focus on how Sikh history informs like actual problem solving for the world's problems, right? Like how it actually gives us solutions
Right.
to the world's problems from a systemic level, rather than focus on like how Sikh history inspires me personally. Because
Right.
I think the the Panthic and personal, right, part of Sikhi, those two sides of the same coin, we often conflate the personal with the Panthic, the individual with the systemic. And now I'm a big proponent of just keep your personal Sikhi to yourself, and know that, onu gupt rakho, but think about ways that you can really have a Panthic life as well.
Well, you kind of are doing
Yeah.
that with your career now, right? I mean,
Yeah.
essentially, you studied. I know you had like neuroscience and like, it seemed like for a random person, like just looking at it, I would have thought, well, this is kind of all over the place.
It
But you
is.
had you had but you had a certain trajectory, and then you
Yeah.
shifted it,
Yeah.
and now you're putting those skills to work
Mhm.
in your current position. Now,
Yeah.
you're currently with that? Is it Strive Together? What is it?
Strive Together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I studied neuroscience, international development, nonprofit work, basically everything and anything under the sun. I probably read a book on it. But um, now I just got done with grad school. I studied applied psychology with a specialization in organizational psychology. So I studied how organizations develop. Um, and so I use that right now at my role at Strive Together, where I am thinking about how to build a people first culture, how to build a culture of anti racism, how to build a culture of intersectionality and care at the organization, so that the organization can do better work with our 70 plus communities. So
Is most of that work here in the United States, or is it global?
it's in the US.
Okay.
So Strive Together is basically, if I had to explain it, um, it's a network of 70 communities across the US.
Okay.
So those communities can be nonprofit organizations, they can be school districts, they can be a coalition of organizations within cities. And we support them holistically. So helping them think through their financial sustainability, helping them think through the programs that they offer
Okay.
to eliminate racial disparities in education, and really giving them access to resources that they might not have.
But
Because,
then when
yeah.
you say it's a network like that, though, it's basically already people that are kind of on board.
Mhm.
So do you get a lot of resistance for any of the things that you're proposing, or is it mostly positive reaction?
Yeah. So the thing with anti-racism work is everyone wants to do it until they actually
Till they find out what it actually entails.
find out what it actually is.
Right.
Because it's the new like buzzword, right? Anti-racism, racial equity. But to actually take action on these principles, to actually make it a reality, implies that you learn and unlearn everything you've been taught.
Hmm.
And because we live in a nation, in a world system that is based on white supremacy, right? One group of people is the default. And we've all learned those things, even if we're not white, right? And to then call yourself anti-racist, and to then do the work within an institution so that the institution becomes anti-racist, means to dismantle a lot of those policies, procedures, but then those mental models that exist, fundamentally changing how you think and feel and see the world, right? And that's difficult. That takes time, and that takes a lot of concentrated effort. And so there is little resistance in people calling themselves anti-racist, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when it
So I think we all
actually,
think of ourselves that way, but when you actually
yeah,
have to think about anti-racist means that you're taking actions and steps
yeah,
specifically towards or against racist infrastructure.
yeah.
And
And
that's scary.
that is scary because it's kind of like Guru Tegh Bahadur, right? Like you're the person doing the thing. You're constantly sticking out as the weird one,
Yeah.
right? You're the person who's leading these uncomfortable conversations. You're the person that's making people think twice about what they are, who they are, how they're acting. But then you also have the courage to and the humility to say, I am the person that I want to help too. So for me, like, there's so many lessons to be learned from Sikh history about how to, like, be anti-racist, or anti-oppression in general.
Okay.
Right. And so applying that understanding to my role now is the way that I feel like I'm doing my kamai right now. Constantly thinking about, like, what would Guru do in
Okay.
this situation? And it's been fruitful. It's been fruitful because even in the Panth, you see this, like, increased consciousness of the anti-Blackness, the anti or the pro-whiteness that we have within our own community.
Sure.
And we're using the Guru's history and the Guru's precedents and the Guru's institutions to, like, have these conversations. And I think that's awesome. Um, it just speaks to how relevant and how forever new the Guru is, you know?
Yeah. No, that's very interesting. Because
Yeah.
I can imagine if you have to evaluate yourself and some of your own racism that it's not overt, right? It's subtle or it's pre-programmed or it's not a conscious racism, right? So I can imagine struggling with that because if you're telling me, hey, this thing that you're saying or doing is racist, and I'm thinking I'm not a racist at all,
Yeah.
and you're like, yeah, I'm not saying you are a racist, but you have racism in you. It's kind of
Yeah.
a sticky,
Yeah.
quite difficult. Like I can
Yeah.
imagine just being like, you know what, forget this is BS. I'm not going to listen to this and just get out of there because I'd be like, I know what I am. I don't
Yeah.
need somebody else to. So I'm imagining that must be happening at some level, even
Yeah.
though these are people in a network that are on board.
Yeah. I think just from a Barney angle, and you can tell me how you feel about this. Like, you know, Guru Sahib acknowledges that we have the potential to be Gurmukhs and we have the potential to be Manmukhs, right?
Yep.
In Barney.
Yep.
And there's no judgment behind that. There's no, like, you know,
Judgment. It depends on how you
judgment in the
say.
sense that, like, Guru Sahib just stating a fact, right? Gurmukh lada, Manmukh kuvaya,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. In those senses, yeah.
It's just stating a fact. Like, there's a Gurmukh part of you, there's a Manmukh part of you. You have the capacity to be a Gurmukh. You also have a capacity to be a Manmukh. And so you pick, right?
Right. But there is a little bit of like the Munmuk foolishly wastes his life.
Yeah.
Right. So there is a little bit of wisdom and
right,
foolishness.
right. And so for me, like, those statements are not an attack on, like, my inherent worth as a
Right.
human,
Right.
right?
As a matter of fact, I would say that's the only two categories that the Guru divides human beings into.
Yeah.
Not race, not religion, nothing like
Yeah.
that. But Guru Sahib says there's Manmukhs and there's Gurmukhs. And then that's it. It's kind of it has to do with your thinking and it has nothing to do with nothing else.
And so I apply that same level of objectivity to words like racist and anti-racist.
Okay.
Right? We are such complex people, humans, just in general. There's different parts of us that are growing and learning at different times, right? you can be anti-racist in one moment and you can be racist in the next. And I think taking away that value judgment, that if you find yourself perpetuating racist ideas, even unconsciously or consciously, that you somehow have lower worth than someone who isn't doing that. I think that is why, like right now, the public discourse around racism is so tied up in these like individual identities,
Right.
where we're afraid of the word racist. We're afraid of the word racism because saying that word somehow demeans someone else's identity or worth. But I think that's not what it is. It's like we've all been conditioned within this system that is racist, right? We are a product of a white supremacy system. And so learning and unlearning is just that. It's just a process. And so I mean, just relying on like the way that Guru Sahib and Bani talks about our different identities, right? Like we all have ego, but we all have Waheguru's light in us. We all are plagued by Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, Ahankar, but we all have the capacity of being able to embody Sat, Santokh, Daya, Taram, and Himmat, right?
Right.
It's that same continuum. It's that same level of reflection, but applied to the current moment of racist versus anti-racist.
Yeah, I think the reason it can get a little sticky is just because I also recognize, okay, so this is how I try to explain it to some of my more conservative friends.
Yeah. And you have many of them, which I'm always impressed by because
I'm surrounded by them.
I am too, but I have not yet made that many close friends.
Because I think you got to, I'm looking at it more like there's extremes on both sides. Mm-hmm. And what's happening is even like moderate conservatives, they're just on a team that's anti-liberal, even if the liberal is just a few feet across the other line from them. Right. So sometimes it's just about being on the team. Then you just want to be like, oh, liberals are stupid, or no, conservatives are racist. And that's not true. But like when we use terms like, okay, this is a racist country, because I don't really believe that it's a racist country, but not like Nikki Haley. Okay. I'm not trying
not like Nikki Haley.
I'm not trying to say it like she's saying it. I'm saying it in the sense that because I feel like the country's willing to evolve, and it has. For example, this is how I show the white supremacy. Barack Obama does not become president unless white people let him. Unless white people voted for him, he would have never become president. Okay. And there's many things like that. The reason we had a civil rights movement is because white people decided to have a civil rights movement, not because black people decided. Black people would have wanted civil rights anytime it was offered to them. But it wasn't until they had white allies that could change the system they created. It wasn't going to happen. No matter how hard they tried, they would have had to burn it all down. But it did evolve, right? We would have had slavery still if white people didn't decide to not have slavery. So that's the evidence to me of the white supremacy. Because unless they give that power up, which means they have it, nothing's going to change.
Yeah.
And we're at the infancy of accepting blacks into our society and minorities in general. So it might take some time still. And I know on the extreme liberal side, there is nope, no reform, burn it all down, abolish it all. Let's start over with a better system. And I understand the thinking behind it. I understand, and I actually appreciate the passion behind that. But I don't think that's realistic. It's not going to move the other people. It's not going to move the people that are on the right. It's not going to move the people that are in the middle, just slightly to the right. It's going to alienate them. It's going to make them feel like, well, you just think I'm a racist anyway. So, I mean, again, I'm an idiot. I don't know anything. Okay. I didn't study political science. I didn't study it like the way you're doing. And you're actually dealing with these issues. So I would, look to you to advise that, oh yes, there's truth in that, or no, there's not. And I know you and I have we've had a few conversations offline that are probably a little too controversial for this podcast, but I think that's the inherent problem. We can't deny that there is white supremacy because racism is simply about power. It's and you can be black and believe that whites are superior, and that's a racist thought. Doesn't mean the black guy is racist against blacks. It's who has power. Who is one race superior to another? That's how I looked at it anyway.
Yeah.
So it's that power struggle.
Yeah, and so you brought up a lot. And I think it's important to acknowledge that yes, America is evolving and there's elements of it that are actively trying to like dismantle the systems that oppress people. I mean, like I work at an organization that does that, right?
Yeah.
But I think if you look at America as a system, like when you look at the human body, right? There's so many different systems, the nervous system, digestive system, right? That work together in harmony to then move this body forward. I think if we look at America through that lens, our birth as a nation was through the genocide of indigenous people, and through the lens of like colonization. And so we built systems around that, right? We built systems, housing, education,
Yep.
politics around that idea that we as white men who are wealthy and are Puritan, we own this land by no other virtue than the color of our skin. And that has then rolled into like all other expressions of oppression that we have in America. And so if your digestive system is off, but your nervous system is okay, you can still have a functioning body, right? It just won't mean that you're well, totally.
Right, right.
And so I think when we think about white supremacy and the journey that America is on, I do think at one point we will have to abolish a lot of the systems that we have, right? We have to amputate sometimes.
Yeah, maybe.
And that's
maybe
okay.
That's true. Yeah, and maybe you're right. If that's the case, it's okay.
Yeah, to preserve the body, sometimes you have to amputate and you have to get rid of the infected area. That's completely valid. And
right, but keep in mind too, with infected areas, you can also take antibiotics first, right? So, and that's what I was trying to say is like, it depends on how you're defining abolishing, because sometimes things get abolished over time just because they're so different than where they started.
And the gurus gave us examples of like systems that have been abolished, right? Like the Masand system was abolished later during the later Guru period, right?
Yeah.
It was started and then it got corrupted and then it got abolished, right? So I think even from like a Sikh history angle, we have examples of systems that started out with good intentions and needed to change given the circumstances. But I think like this level of what I find troubling is that unwillingness to let go, right? Like you have white supremacists who are holding on to the past as a weapon, right? They're holding on to these systems that don't work for everyone.
Yeah, like the Make America Great Again. Yeah. I mean, great for who?
Right, exactly. And so that's when you really have to question, like, what's the benefit of holding on to these systems if we know they don't work for everyone, right? And then you get into conversations around who is actually benefiting from this system, right?
Sure.
It's white men.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's fear though too. Like it's
Right.
like the whole thing. You see people defending billionaires as if one day they're going to be a billionaire,
Right.
right?
And so when I talk about this, when I say the word system, it's not just like these institutions that you see. It's not just these people that you see. It's also these narratives that we've
Right,
crafted to support this dissonance that we feel, because white supremacy harms all of us,
right.
right? Like, yes, the Black community has been harmed the most, right? They have been exploited from day one. But white supremacy also has an emotional cost to white people, because they have to live with it. They have to live with their actions of like forcibly sterilizing like Black men, right?
But
And
most
Black
white
women.
people don't know about that.
Right, they don't.
Right?
But
They
like
don't even know about it.
the emotional cost of protecting yourself from the identity of a white supremacist
Yeah.
is so big that you then have to craft these narratives. So I'm reading more into, lately, I've been reading more about like trauma informed care, and looking at racism as a prevalent traumatic experience. So
Yeah.
COVID-19 has been one of the most chronic traumatic events that we have experienced as a country, as a world, right? Because it's scary. Our livelihoods are being taken away. We're forced into situations of stress and de-stress and insecurity, and danger. And so that has a physical and emotional toll on us. So we find ways to cope.
Right.
White supremacy and the founding of this nation is founded inherently on violence, right? You had white men killing indigenous people, right? You had white men raping so many Black women, right? You have to then build coping mechanisms to deal with the dissonance, right?
Oh
On
yeah,
one,
absolutely. Because it's hard to admit.
right. And so those narratives of I can be a billionaire even though I'm poor, or I am not a racist, right? Because I've done everything right in my life, right? Or I have a Black friend, I'm not racist.
Right.
Those are all narratives that we use to protect ourselves from the hurt, the emotional impact of actually reckoning with ourselves. And like Barney acknowledges this too. Reckoning with yourself at any level, right, is difficult, right? In Asa Divar, what was the party that says, Chhad Duniya Andar Javana,
Yeah.
right? Kappad Roop Sahavana, Chhad
Bhavna, Chadinda, Andar Javna, yeah.
yeah. Manda Changa Apna, Pehi Kita Pavana, right? Like all of these shabads exist, and they talk about a reckoning. They talk about you finally looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, yeah, I was a piece of shit.
Yeah.
Right? But the way that Barney handles those really tough emotions that come from that rigorous reflection is with acceptance and grace.
Well,
And
there's also something else there too. Because
yeah,
Guru Sahib's usually, almost always actually, it's like a first person thing.
yeah,
The Guru is saying that about himself,
yeah.
or the Guru themselves, they're saying it in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And when you read that, you internalize that and then look at yourself that way. It's not like the Guru is telling us, hey, you need to
Yeah.
change this way because you're a bigot.
Yeah.
Like it's
No,
nothing like
but
that.
it's a human, it like Barney is universal
Yeah,
because it
yeah,
talks about the humanness
sure.
of creation, right? And sort of working within that framework to then like experience and reflect on the divine within yourself and around you.
Yeah.
So and so looking at Guru's model of like inner reflection that is rigorous, that is honest, but also like Guru gives us the tools to deal with those tough emotions, right? It's not through further like bigoted behavior.
Right.
Right? The outcome of that reflection is a change in behavior for the better, for Sarbatapala, towards like Nam. And so using
Right. But
that,
again, like when you go back to like you're saying their coping mechanisms, it made me think of two examples. But like the first one was several years ago, I heard on NPR a story of a tour guide at a plantation that goes through and takes people through the slave quarters and stuff and shows them what it was like. And she was talking about how she would tell the stories, of the slaves and how they were kept and how they were treated and all this kind of stuff. And she said increasingly over the years, in like the last 10 to 12 years, more and more she was seeing people kind of sighing or rolling their eyes. And then somebody would say something like, yeah, but didn't they have a place to stay? Didn't the master give them food? Is like they were challenging what's being told to them as a nightmare story. I mean, the treatment of slaves is unimaginable.
Yeah.
The kind of violence they experienced. But instead of recognizing that and digesting it, that this is what happened, this is the history of our country, they said, yeah, but those guys had a roof over their head. They got food every day. They were taken care of to some degree.
Yeah. And I think that's because like slavery, the institution of slavery is so crucial to the American identity that you have to justify it, right? And I think that's also why, like, you see statements like that because people don't know the history of Africa. They don't know, like, the history of the places where these like enslaved people were coming from.
I think it's beyond that. I don't think they care. They just don't.
They don't care either.
Yeah. They don't want to get. They're just saying, "Don't blame me. It's not my fault."
Yeah,
that's essentially what they're saying, right?
Yeah, and this, I think, as members of this nation, we are part of it. We make up this nation. We also take responsibility for it. So, for example, like in my work at Strive Together, my team and I talk constantly about what is culture, what is our organizational culture, what makes it, what changes it, what evolves it, and really at the core, culture is a set of behaviors that groups in an organization do, right? And because of those behaviors, you have these values and norms that exist, right? In a country, you multiply that by 1,000-fold. And so in a culture, that there's also an institutional responsibility, but there's also an individual responsibility, right? And that's what the Guru said too. Like, we have, as Sikhs, a responsibility to further the culture of Nam, the culture of Gursikhi in our personal lives, but also from up and live that Gursikhi culture as a Panth, right? As members of this country, we have the responsibility to embody and take responsibility for our nation, both individually and institutionally. Because while we may not have been slave owners, we are living on land. We are living on the society that has
the economy.
The economy.
People don't. Tobacco companies are some of the richest companies in the world, and their product was cultivated by slaves.
And so, how many Punjabi families, how many Sikh families do you know that have gas stations that sell tobacco?
Yep, they sell
right?
Cigarette, yep.
So we are still benefiting from the system that has been run by.
Yeah, there's no doubt. The United States of America has a responsibility to the citizens, even in the past.
But we do too. So,
well, that's what I'm saying. Like, we as a country, the United States of America, because it's us, we the people, right? So we do have a responsibility. most of my conservative friends too, they're going to agree with that to some degree. They just don't agree how, what that's going to be. Because then reparations comes up and they say, oh, we're going to give $10,000 to every black person. It's like, wait, what? And then the other side is like, no, we need to give the ownership of the tobacco companies to black families, or, and it's too much for people to swallow. And therefore it's just going to be dead on arrival. And that the other example I thought of when we were talking earlier was affirmative action. And affirmative action itself can be very controversial because even a lot of minority organizations are against affirmative action because they say it perpetuates a lot of the racism. But it's so funny to hear people defend it. So kid applying for law school, okay, white kid, due to affirmative action, he didn't get, even though his grades were there, everything, he didn't get the seat in the school, and it went to African American or somebody. And the complaints start. Well, isn't that racist? He was qualified. Now you're not giving it to white people, which is I think a legitimate argument against affirmative action because they've also changed it now to not include Indians. So right, because we're economically better or whatever. So now like Harvard has a lawsuit or something, or Stanford or somebody, because they said we won't take Chinese people. And just like now what's going on. But that aside, so then the only way I could get the point across to them about why that's not that bad as they're making it out to, because I mean, they're all like, God, it's BS. This, I can't believe that, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh my God, his life is ruined. What's he going to do now? He didn't get into his law school. What's he going to do? Oh, no, he got into Michigan State. Wait, what? Because do you understand that that's the problem? That other guy will not get in anywhere. And what's he going to do?
Yeah.
He had to be given a seat to get in. Otherwise, he's not going to law school.
Yeah.
Your kid still went to a great law school and is still going to become a great attorney. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure even if he didn't, you guys were all going to be good. You were going to end up passing on your business to him or whatever it is. This has no impact on his life whatsoever, but it does over there.
Yeah. I think that's like the differential impact that we talk about, right? That the default in our country and the world is that white people are guaranteed success.
Right.
No matter where they are in the wealth stratification, right? They are guaranteed a certain level of an okay life.
Which doesn't mean there aren't poor white people, because we're not talking about specifics.
Yeah.
We're talking about in general.
We're just talking about the aggregate, right?
Yes, right.
But within this world where white people have this standard of living that is assumed to be theirs, right? Everyone else has to fight for that. And that's problematic too, because, we're talking about racism, but racism is also upheld by capitalism, where it's basically whoever wins and whoever loses, right? Not everyone can win all of the time. And so you have this racist system. And then within a capitalist system, you have that sense of competition and scarcity that then further perpetuates things like this, where Asians are against affirmative action because they think that they are now competing with the Black people, right? And so this is, like, I've been thinking a lot about this just personally as well, because Barney doesn't have an all or nothing framework, right? It can't, because we believe in Ikonkar. If there's only one, then there is something for everyone, right? And so when we talk about like Sarbat Tapala, it's inherently against this all or nothing idea that we live in, as a society.
Right. But even capitalism, you're talking about an economic structure. But like communists also are racist. And that communist
That's
system
true.
also, like, I don't know if any of these systems are
Right.
going to, all these systems are going to reinforce whatever power structure is in place.
Yeah.
That's
And
how
I
they're all
think
designed.
on a certain level, yes, that is true. Power and power dynamics will always exist as long as there's two people on Earth.
Right. Right.
Right. But I think like what I've been thinking about is this, like, for me, the existence of power and power dynamics, the existence of like capitalism and racism, it all stems from it's like काम क्रोध लोभ मोह अहंकार. Right?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, first of all, I don't know that there's anything wrong with power dynamics. I know
No,
that,
there's not.
yeah,
There's
right.
not.
There's
Because
the,
even
the
in
guru and the Sikh is a power dynamic.
yeah, and we've used power dynamics, right, within our Sikh history.
Yeah.
To make alliances with people, with communities. Like that's what like the pre-independence era Sikh movement was all about. Like, do we go with Pakistan? Do we go with India? Do we go with like, how do we navigate those power dynamics that are there, right? And Guru talks about this too in that Shabad, like Harsyam Tadakiya, right? Like there's so many alliances that we can build on family, on community, right? And those involve like the exchange of power. But using power as a end all be all, is not like the Sikh framework. Power can be used as a tool, but the tool, in order to realize a world that is founded on Sarbat Pala, that is founded, on Ikonkar.
I think that's the big thing, because the gurus weren't against kings and kingdoms, right? I mean, they didn't say, let's tear down this imperial structure. We actually called the gurus Sache Patsha and Maharaja and, Maharaj and, these terms. And the guru didn't fight against those structures. The guru fought against the lying, the dishonesty, the mistreatment of people, and said, if you're going to be a king, be a just king.
Yeah. And so it really focuses the reflection on, who does this system serve? Who does this system harm?
Right.
And what is this system built to do? Right? Because if you are a sovereign and you're using your power to rule justly and to get rid of oppression in your nation, then that's great. But if you have that power and you're using it irresponsibly and people are dying, like our president right now, then like Guru has been very clear in what floats their boat and what doesn't, right? What is, where that stance is. And I think like, while Guru Sahib says that this world is all Maya, right? Guru Sahib says that none of this is real, but Guru also then acknowledges that this is where the divine is, right? And so can we find ways to live out that divine in our daily lives using these human frameworks that we're surrounded by, right? Yeah. Where we are not the ones chasing Maya. We're not the ones chasing this illusion, but we are making the illusion work for us so that Nam can be channeled.
Yeah. And, I'm not trying to get too philosophical here, but like you said, not real, and you said illusion. And
I definitely think my personal belief is when Guru Sahib talks about Maya, Guru Sahib is talking about capitalism.
Okay, yeah, we're going to disagree on that one. Because the Gurus also created cities and invited people to come do commerce. They said, be merchants, trade here. So that's capitalism. Come here, establish your business, sell what you can, and then the whole society prospers. But I think capitalism in and of itself, though, if you're just to say free markets,
yes.
Yeah, things like that. I think that's scary because now everything is about a bottom line.
Yep.
And most of what we practice here is all about bottom line.
Exactly.
So I agree with that. That's what I was saying. I don't want to get philosophical about. But when you said Maya and illusion, I think are not real. You mentioned the word. Guru Sahib uses those terms to tell us because ikonkar sat naam. Sat is true. True means permanent, constant.
Yeah.
The unreal things, the false things, the illusion is that we think these temporary things are the real thing.
Yeah.
And they're just temporary. They come and they go. Waheguru does not. Waheguru is that constant. That's why Waheguru is the truth. And the reality. Waheguru is the reality because it's the real thing. We get attached to temporary things. This entire planet and solar system and everything, it's going to come and go. Right? So I get a little leery about using those terms to imply that illusion in the sense that, oh, it's just a dream. And then your true spiritual awakening, you'll come up to reality. Like it's the Matrix or something. Those are fun analogies. It's fun to think that way, but I don't know that that's what Guru Sahib is talking about. But anyway, actually that was a lot of deep stuff we got into here. It was really great, actually. I feel like
I was not expecting that.
Yeah, but you helped me get a little perspective on some of the things that I think, and I'm hoping other people listening to might open up their minds and start thinking about things that they're not normally thinking of. And especially knowing that you're doing this work, that this is what you're engaged in, that you're kind of on the front lines dealing with people and dealing with these issues as they come up in these organizations. So you're more likely to recognize it than most of us. So hearing you talk about it gives a totally different perspective than just those of us that sit on Facebook arguing with each other.
I have stopped. I think I argued with people when COVID.
I was one of them for a little while.
No. I mean, in the sense that I've verbalized my opinions in written form on Facebook more this past year than I have ever.
But COVID, we can't go anywhere. We can't do anything.
I mean, what else is there to do?
Right.
But I've actually in the last 2 or 3 months have stopped doing that because I realized that one, it's an undue burden on me as someone who does experience racism to then have to explain and justify that every day. But then also because recognizing that individually, even if everyone is anti-racist, even if everyone is no longer perpetuating white supremacy, the real work that we have to do is with changing and dismantling our systems, which is beyond people, is beyond individual expressions of racist ideas. And so I have stopped engaging on an individual level when I see, especially on Facebook, people perpetuating racism.
Right.
Because I'm nothing I can say or can do will convince you to think otherwise. That's a journey on their own, right? But what I can do is use my talents and strengths to focus on the institutional level, focus on the ways that the nonprofit industry perpetuates white supremacy, focus on the way that within an institution, racist ideas are perpetuated. So that has helped. I no longer get anxious when I log into Facebook, which has done wonders for my mental health lately.
I can imagine.
Because it was stressful, Ryuji. It was really stressful.
No, I know. And then it's all you had to do is put up a post, someone like me comments, and then someone comments right back, and then I got to comment back, and then other people are chiming in, and you're following this thread, and it's evolved, and you're like, oh my God, I was just challenging this one idea. I didn't, now I'm being called names, and now I'm calling them names, and they're calling each other names. And it's just like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's exhausting. But I think for me, it was mostly like, I didn't know that people around me could have such like thoughts about like doubting the fact that police brutality exists in America, doubting the fact that, Black men shouldn't be killed with, impunity.
You know what? That's probably a lot to do with being in an echo chamber, though. I feel like we all do that. We start to think a certain way. Our friends are all that way. And all these algorithms feed the way we already think. And it's happening on the left, it's happening on the right, and everybody's being pulled apart, and they're being reinforced with the thing that they already have. Because I can tell you right now, I know one of my conservative friends who's very anti Black Lives Matter. And I tried to talk to him a little bit about it, but he was very anti-police and police brutality because he'd experienced it. He always thought they were jerks, because of his own experiences. But then when he was seeing the anti-police attacks coming from like Black Lives Matter supporters, it unhinged him. Like all of a sudden he was like pro-police. And I'm like,
yeah, because that's a dissonance.
Yes. Right? Like what you were talking about earlier.
It's a dissonance.
Yeah. So those kinds of things, it's very challenging, but I feel like we're not approaching each other the right way.
Yeah.
I talk to all my conservatives. They're still my friends. I talk to them. I can't stand some of the things they say, and they can't stand some of the things I say. They're like, oh my God, you're going to turn this country into 1920s Russia, whatever. And I'm just like, no, that's not true. Listen to what I'm saying,
Yeah.
But if we're not talking to each other, if we can't, as bad as this sounds, we have to be able to understand where they're coming from, even if they're racist.
Yeah, for sure.
Because like you said earlier, we've made racism and racist label so bad and so disgusting that if somebody's even got a hint of it, they're going to get defensive.
Yeah. And I think practicing how to have like sustained dialogue between like different viewpoints is healthy. It's the potential to harm that actually stops me from like having these conversations, because it's easy for me to be in a conversation with someone who has roots in white supremacy and understand where they're coming from. Right. I can be like, yeah, I get it. Like your family. And I actually did that. I was actually part of NPR's, not NPR, sorry. I totally forgot, but I did this conversation event with one person from Kentucky who's an old white guy who had whose family was in mining, and he identified as politically conservative, and I at that point had identified myself as progressive liberal. And so we had talked about our experiences like in America. And it was easy for me to be like, yeah, I understand your parents worked hard. They pushed you to go to college, and like your family identity is really strong. I get that. But it's always the other side that has difficulty seeing my experiences. Right. So within a white supremacy system, you see even that default of, white people is carried forth in the conversations that we have with one another, where implicitly I have to practice more empathy and understanding to see the other side.
Right.
But that same
It's not
empathy
returned.
and is not returned. And so you have this unhealthy dynamic emerging where both sides are at the table, but both sides don't have the equal level of belonging to speak their minds and to be understood at the table.
Right, right. No, I
And
get what you're
so,
saying. That does make it difficult, but
and
I think
it
my
does.
personally, I just dismiss them. I'm like, they're never going to get it. Who cares?
But see, like the fact that, but you began this whole conversation by saying we have to understand both sides, right?
Yeah, yeah. But the other side
But the
doesn't feel
other
obligated to do
side
it. Right,
doesn't feel obligated to
right.
extend that same courtesy.
Yeah,
And
that's the challenge.
that's the challenge. And you have not acknowledged that as well, where
Yeah.
you're saying they're not going to understand. Well, here you are, like telling, like you and I are saying, like, yeah, we should understand the other side, but
the other side doesn't want to.
But
no,
others, we know that in our bones, right? We know that
right.
in our bones that they don't understand. And I think this is the challenge of like any activist, person of color, or white in their communities, right? Where the burden of explaining and empathy and discourse is placed on the people who are trying to change the system rather than the ones that are upholding it.
No, that's true. But I think the thing is that also happens a lot because that's the vocal, that's the, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? Like those are the prominent people. Those are the people up front that you're clashing with. There's probably a lot of people that would change if they just understood it better and they would be willing to see our side. We're just not experiencing them because they're not the ones that will put themselves forward that way either.
I mean, yeah, I would like to believe that too. And
well, I say that because I've seen people change. A lot of my friends have changed. You know, like I'm not saying they went from Republican to Democrat, but they definitely went from like, what the heck is this all about? What's going on? You know, what's going on with the party that I knew, or what's going on with the, you know, because even like we could criticize any politician going back, but like in the 80s, a lot of Democrats and Republicans used to go, you know, meet in Congress and then they would go have dinner. And if you talk to a lot of the old timers now, they're like, that disappeared over the decades. Now everybody is actually polarized, even in the like in their personal interactions. And you know, and that made me start thinking, like, when George Washington got elected, do you know how they did this?
No.
It's really interesting because it shows you how far away we've gotten from everything. Congress cast votes for who they wanted to be president. Number one got president. Number two got vice president. Just think about that. It wasn't two parties campaigning against each other. They were voting for who they thought was most qualified. And then the person that everybody thought was the second most qualified became the vice president. Can you imagine today if you had elected like a Democrat for a Republican or for the president and a Republican for the vice president, because those were the two most qualified people and you just didn't care about anything else? How different things would be how different would campaigning be when you know that I'm going to be teamed up with that person afterwards and we got to work together?
Yeah. No, I can't even imagine that. So when you said it, I had no reaction because I was like, that's absurd.
It seems absurd. It seems absurd.
Right. And I think like conversations like this, just in general, like expand the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's what's most needed is we're so used to the way things are that we don't have an imagination of the ways things can be.
True. Very true.
And, you know, for one, that requires us to move from just surviving to actually like living our lives, right? We talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? There's so many people in America that are just focused on day-to-day survival that the mental capacity it takes to to organize and to have these conversations and to think about like the ways that life could be is so far beyond.
Yeah, most people are just like one medical issue away from being ruined, or a car problem. They get a car problem, they can't. They don't have money to fix it, and they can't get to work now.
Exactly.
So, and a lot of times we just ignore that because we don't see it in our day to day.
Yeah, and that's the reality of America. We are not this like exalted nation that has limitless freedom. We are a nation that is struggling with poverty. We are a nation that is struggling with violence. We are a nation that is struggling with very deep, deep, deep political failings, right?
Right.
But the narrative of America is so different than the reality that people, in order to cope with their day-to-day demands, again, we talk about that dissonance and trauma. In order to cope with the traumas of living in America, people adopt these narratives, these like hyper idealistic narratives that are not rooted in reality and therefore limit their capacity to have real conversations.
Yeah, and I'm thinking maybe it's not so much that they're not rooted in reality. I think they're exaggerated. I think that's the problem. Like, America's number one. America's the greatest. America still might be the best country on the planet to move to and try to make a living. It might be. But the way we talk about it as if everybody else is insignificant, and they're not. When you look at medical technology in Singapore, and how they're advancing, Malaysia and Singapore and South Korea, their technology advancement is all the kind of stuff that we used to do. We are falling behind in education. We fall behind in healthcare, and we still want to say, no, America's the greatest country in the world, the greatest country that's ever been. And that may be true in certain categories or in certain ways of looking at it, but it's not the way. We shouldn't be resting on our laurels. We shouldn't be saying, okay, because of that, we don't have to do anything. We got no work to do. No, we got a lot of work. That to me is the reason why I think America is great, is because we can self-evaluate and work on ourselves, even though it might take some time and it might take some people raising a lot of noise right now and identifying things and talking about things that may start there. But I think America has that capacity. I believe we are a country that's evolved so much. It's just a lot to evolve in this last 100 years. We're trying to keep up with technology. I mean, technology from 100 years ago to today is astounding. And society has to keep up with that too. And you have to keep up with what equality really means.
Yeah.
But, that kind of stuff. So anyway, we've done quite a bit of it's been like almost an hour and a half or something.
Yeah. I can keep talking.
I could too. I mean, it's actually fascinating. What I'll propose is let's do this again sometime.
Okay.
Come back another time. And then we can kind of even get into some of the other topics.
Yeah.
Really, really appreciate you coming on. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I can't wait to talk more.
Yeah, for sure. I enjoyed this. This has definitely been really enriching, and I don't have the opportunity to like talk at this depth a lot. So it was really, really enjoyable.
No, I enjoyed it too. All right, Balpreet Kaur, do you have any like social media things you need to plug, or how people can get a hold of you or anything like that?
I'm trying to use less and less. Okay. I'm trying to get to a point where I can delete Facebook.
That would be great. That would be awesome.
I have a website where I share Gurbani translations.
So check
that out, that'd be great.
Next time we're going to talk about the Gurbani translations, because I really like what you're doing with that too.
Oh, thanks.
So next time we'll talk about. So go ahead. What is the website so that people can kind of?
It's www.balihadi.com. So BALIHAAREE.com.
All right, very good. Balpreet Kaur, thank you for stepping into the Nihung's arena, and we'll talk again.
Okay, Ji.
Okay, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.